Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton. Got another Data Live deck today. Probably the least explored of the main Data Live deck cores. It's the green 8-bar Yoshino deck. The object of this deck is basically to deny opponents soul damage in their attack phase. We've got a level 3 Neg Soul combo that we can get down at level 2. We also have a Neg Soul event that we can play directly from hand at counter step. A lot of stuff here to keep our opponents from getting damage in when they attack us. This is not a competitive deck. It's got a Time Machine combo at level 1, which is fun but not particularly efficient. The Neg Soul endgame does work if we can get it down, which usually isn't too much of a problem, but it's really susceptible to level down and removal and blink. And there's a lot of that going around these days, so this will have some really bad matchups, especially as more and more of that blink and removal tech enters the meta. It is, however, a very cheap deck. You can get this deck for about $100, and if you trim the most expensive cards, it becomes a budget deck really quickly. The deck wins by looping that Time Machine combo. It's on a bar, so every time we trigger a bar, we can get a climax back into hand and hopefully keep that combo going. We keep it going until we get our endgame on board. The Soul Wall combo keeps us alive at level 2, hopefully, and into level 3, buying us an extra turn or two, stalls out our opponent, doesn't let them hit us for big damage, hopefully, and gives us the time to get our damage in. We'll start at level 0, mostly tech stuff, not too focused on winning board, more focused on getting our combo together because that is how we're going to win board in the mid game and beyond. We do run 4 of the Shido Itsuka. It's honestly just too powerful. Blink stuff on play, lingering Neg Soul effects, Oboro combos, things like that. This can just deny them. We can also kill it and pay 1 to top check 4 and add a character. Really good disruptive piece. Helps us get stuff into hand, helps us mill a little bit, and it's yellow fix for some level 3 tech. You know how much I love on death effects. We run 3 of the Kotori Itsuka. On attack, it gives a character 1000 power. When it dies, pitch 1, top check 4, add a level 1 or higher to hand. This also gets us our level 3 event, which we will talk about more. Useful in just about any context. Visiting the sick Yoshino goes in our back row. When we trigger a climax, we can pitch a climax to top check 2 and add 1. This is nice in 8-bar because every time we trigger a climax, that climax goes into our hand. So if we don't need the climax or if we need to dig for something else, this gives us an easy climax out. It also happens immediately so that we don't have bars stuck in our hand going into refresh. It lets us top check 2 and add 1, so we can add a different climax if we need it. We can add the event if we need it. Anything that's in our deck, we can add. And it also gives all of our other Date or Celestial Spirit characters 500 power. Nice thing to have in the back row, works well with what this deck does. We're also going to run 3 of the level 0 Toka. 2 different on-play abilities. 1, top check if it's a character, add 1, pitch 1. Second, we can pitch a character to draw a card. Can potentially get us climaxes, can mill us down a few cards, gets us things that we actually need, helps us get a level 1 combo. Just a really nice card. Also the most expensive card in the deck, so if we're looking to make this a budget build, this is probably the first card to go. In any case, really useful. We want 3 of them. We also want 3 of Happy Incoming Message Origami. It's the Climax Swapper on play, pay 1. Also on play, reveal hand. If there's a climax, all of our opponent's front row characters lose 500 power. This helps us fix whatever climaxes we might have gotten off of the bar trigger. If we need to get the right one for looping our level 1 or level 3 combos, this helps us get there. It's why we run 3 of it. And then finally 2 of the Swimsuit Kotori. On-play drop salvage also gives 1000 power to a character. It also lets us rearrange the top 2 cards of our deck so that we can fix our triggers, which is really nice in a bar deck because we would rather trigger the bar later because of the blind stock. It gets us stuff out of waiting room. It gives a little bit of power. A lot of things it does, it's helpful as a 2 of. Moving on to level 1, it's all about that Time Machine combo that just keeps stuff on field until we can get our Soul Wall down. Yoshino missing her Yoshinan. Combo at Encore Step. This level 1 character goes to memory, and at our next draw step, it comes back with an additional 3500 power. So it's going to swing at 6 when we have the bar down. When it comes back, it will be at 8500 power. It's nice to remove things from field. However, it does not need to get particularly big because this effect takes place at Encore Step no matter what. So we can crash this in all 3 lanes, but at Encore Step, it still goes to memory. We don't lose it. We never have to side with this. We can always get maximum damage out of it. We don't have to worry about getting a reverse in order to keep our field. When it comes back on the next turn, we can get really big with this because of some back row stuff we have. A 12,000, potentially 13,000 power-ish threshold in one of these lanes if we're facing something that's particularly big. Because it's on a bar, it's easy to loop this combo. Next at level 1, this is going to be our other back row slot, long range shot origami. At the beginning of our climax phase, we can give a character 3,000 power. This is what helps us get the time machine up to really high power levels. We can also pitch the 3/3 Neg Soul event from our hand and rest this to perform one of the following 2 effects. Look at up to 2, add 1, send the other to waiting room, or choose an opponent's character and that character cannot stand at the start of their next turn. That's really useful going into standby matchups. It forces our opponent to not only play with other cards in their front row, but it also makes it harder for them to use their standby again because they have a card just sitting in the back row that they can't use that they want to keep on field. So while neither of our combos really require us to get up to big power levels on offense to get reverses, it does help us get there so that we can remove our opponent's cards from field, and it gives us another thing we can do with the event if we have it in the mid game. Finally, at level 1, we run 1 copy of Diva of Temptation Miku from Fantasia Bunko. Talked about this card before. Back row utility. This in this deck serves as a tech piece because it gives us some removal. Choose one of 3, rest this, grant a Celestial Spirit character 2,500 power, or we can rest, pitch 1, bottom deck, and opponent's cost 0 card. We can also rest and pay 2 to heal 1 in a pinch in a deck that doesn't have a whole lot of healing. That can be really useful. So does a lot of things for us on 1 card. Not necessarily things we're going to need to use in every matchup. That's why it's a one-of. Level 2, not a whole lot going on. We've got a little bit more back row tech as well as a backup. That backup is the 2/1 Swimsuit Kurami, 2,500 power backup. Also gives us a pay to refresh option on play. This will help us keep level 3 and that Soul Wall combo on field, but it also can refresh us in a pinch if we're out a bunch of climaxes. It's an expensive effect, but it can be worth it if we're out 7 or 8 and still have cards in deck. The other level 2 card we run is Lonely Eyes Yoshino. Cards in front get 500 times X, X equaling their level. When an attack triggers a climax, we can pitch a climax to salvage a character, so this can help us get our level 3 combo together. There is a change effect on it. We don't run the target because it's just an early play killer and it's not as useful in this list, but it does exist. Again, we don't really need a lot of power necessarily on offense. It's nice to have on defense, but we don't necessarily need it on offense, so power isn't as big of a priority in this list. And this also gives us more options when we get into the end game for when we trigger a bar. So between this and the level 0, we have a couple of different things that we can do when we trigger a bar. And then finally level 3, it's all about the Soul Wall combo and the Neg Soul event. We're trying to stay alive as long as we can. Yoshino and Yoshinan, it's on a bar. It's an early play if we have 2 or fewer climaxes in waiting room. The combo, when we have 4 or more other characters on field. Damage from this card does not decrease by side attacking, and the character across from this one gets -2 soul. So we don't need to worry about getting over big boards. We can side and still do full damage, and the character across from it does less. Also, at the beginning of the attack phase, we can pitch 1 to swap this with another character, and it gains 2,000 power. That helps us keep this alive. We can move it into our opponent's weakest lane, keep this alive so that we can loop the combo with the bar again. Or we can put it in front of a certain target if we want to mess up our opponent's lethal swings. It happens at the beginning of attack phase, so that gives us the final choice. It can really mess with opposing boards. It makes it difficult for our opponents to do damage with vanilla swings. We can loop it, and when we have the 3/3 event in hand, we can really mess up our opponent's offensive board. This is subject to blink and removal and level down. So if our opponent runs those things, we can be in a little bit of a bind. We're going to be banking more on the event to come through. But as is, this combo is not bad, especially if we can get it down early and get it looping. This is that Neg Soul event. It's a 3/3 counter event. It negs a total of 3 soul from our opponent's board. We get to choose where it comes from. So we can pick and choose which lanes we want to neg soul from. It's not negging 3 from one lane. It can really mess with our opponent's exact damage swings, and if the Yoshino combo doesn't go through because of a bounce or a blink, we can still neg soul something in at least one lane, especially things that have restanders or Musashis. This can really cripple a strong lane. Also, as we mentioned earlier, we can pitch it to top check 2 with the back row 1-1. We've got a couple of tech level 3s here as well. Battle Stance Origami on play, reveal top card. If it's a level 0, we can put it into stock. That includes climaxes. On play, pitch 1 salvages the 3/3 event. So this is the event bonder that we can potentially get down for 1. It also has a pay 1 ability to give another character 1500 power if we want to get over in a lane. We also run a couple copies of Soul and Rain Yoshino, mostly because it is a stock healer. It's a 2 soul healer we can get down for 1, and it also has a pay 2 ability that lets us bounce an opponent's character to hand. So if we really need to remove something from board, or we want to force our opponent to pay out more stock, or if we can just swing big into an empty lane, we can return something to hand for 2. We don't have a whole lot of heal in this deck. It's relatively cheap to get one of these down and get us a little bit of healing, help us get back into earlier in level 3. And then finally, we do run the Kurumi Icy Tail. It's why we were running 4 of the Shido earlier. It's really nice to have at least one finishing piece that can do extra damage. It's pay 3, pitch 1 for a 5-card Icy Tail, mill the bottom 5, and we burn equal to the number of climaxes milled. It also heals on play, and on reverse, kicks whatever it reversed to memory. So really useful. It's good in basically every Data Live deck. It's one of the reasons that you want to tech in at least a little bit of yellow, at least to make this usable if we need to get a little more damage at the end game. So the Soul Wall is one of the best Soul Walls I've ever seen, mostly because it also has the event to help in case it gets blinked or removed. And because it's on a bar, we have a pretty good chance of looping it to limit the amount of damage our opponents can deal to us over multiple turns. Same goes for the Time Machine combo. Because we can loop it, because we can keep getting it down, and because it essentially can't be denied either by board size or removal tech, it's super easy to loop, and if we can keep it going until we can get our end game down, it helps us build advantage in hand. Also, we have the tech in the back row that makes our bar triggers more useful to us if we trigger the wrong bar or we don't need it for the next turn. We can get something else out of it. The top end is really susceptible to blink and removal though, as I've mentioned, and it also doesn't stop damage from combos, so any damage that's done on an auto effect isn't affected by the Soul Wall. Time Machines, while they're good, while they're fun, they only plus themselves. They don't help us get our end game together. They just help us get cards into hand because we don't need to put them onto field. And finally, bar triggers still don't feel good because we're still blind stocking and there's no good way to pay this out. Frozen Bonds solved this problem by letting us pay out that blind stock immediately. I would love to be able to pay out the blind stock more easily in this, but as is, we can blind stock climaxes and leave ourselves open to pretty big swings. The mid-game board is really straightforward. We want to keep this board on field basically from the time we reach level 1 to the time we can start getting our Soul Wall down. Just keep looping that Time Machine combo in the front row. We want the Yoshino in the back row that lets us pitch those extra bars if we trigger multiple times or if we already have the bar in hand. And we also want the Origami in the other slot so that we can give power and also pitch the basic Realizer event to get something else. Our end game, we want to get the Soul Wall down and we want to keep looping it. I do have one of the Origamis on here as well, mostly because it bonds to the 3/3 event, which we want to have in hand after we combo at level 3. In the back row, we have the Lonely Eyes Yoshino, mostly because if we trigger an extra bar, we can pitch it to salvage one of our end game pieces. As always, there are other cards that can be played in this as well. Angel Manifestation Yoshino is the change target on the Lonely Eyes Yoshino that we talked about earlier. We don't run it mostly because it's just an early play killer, and I would rather have the Lonely Eyes in the back row and the front row be the Soul Wall, because what we can do is at the beginning of climax phase, we can essentially just swap these for one another if one is in waiting room. I just don't see a whole lot of scenarios in which I would rather have this on board than the Lonely Eyes. If you want to run an early play killer, by all means, but realistically, the early play killer isn't as necessary in this list because the Soul Wall can get down at level 2, and it can side attack without losing damage, and we also have the back row stuff that gives us additional power. I don't think this is particularly necessary. Next, it's a level 0 Yoshino. It's actually from Fantasia Bunko. We can pay 1, rest 2, top check 3, and add a character. I like this effect in general. I don't love that it's on rest 2, and in a deck where we really want to be able to get the basic realizer into hand whenever we can, this doesn't add events. It's really, really close, and honestly, if you wanted to run this instead of the back row Yoshino level 0 that we currently have, it makes sense. I can see it. Resting 2 is frustrating in this because it means that we can't use the origami pitch effect with the realizer, but if we can stagger those turns out well, this is definitely useful. I like this effect better than brainstorming just because it's guaranteed to get something, and it's so important to get something when we pay for it. I like this card. I don't know if it works in this list as well, but it's certainly something worth considering. The 1/1 Yoshino, which is probably the highest profile Yoshino card in the entire set, it shows up in a lot of decks, sacrifices itself essentially by running in front of an early play and bombing it at our opponent's attack phase. It's a very good card, but it doesn't work in this list basically because we run time machines and this has to switch with something. It doesn't just run in front of something in an empty slot, it has to switch with something. And if our time machines aren't on board because they're in memory because we used their effect, this has nothing to switch with. So it doesn't work mechanically in this list, although it is a really good card. Finally, we have one more origami. It's an on-death clock salvage. When it dies, we can move the top card of our stock to our clock and then return anything in clock to our hand. That includes climaxes, that includes events. All we're doing is paying 1 to get anything we want out of clock. It's useful. I like this in general. Honestly, there just wasn't enough room for it. So it's very, very rarely going to be an empty effect. I think that the on-death effect that we already have, the top check 4, where we don't have to pay, we just have to pitch out of hand, is going to be a little more consistent for us and a little more useful for us in actually getting our level 1 combo into hand, which is usually what these kinds of early game effects are used for. So here's the list. Like I said, it's not very expensive. The most expensive card is the Confrontation with Humans Toka from the trial deck. If you have your Data Life playset, this might be a fun thing to build just because it's something else. It's something to do with your green cards if you have them and they've just been sitting in a box. This is also very close to a budget deck, especially those Kurimis at level 3 have been coming down quite a bit. They're down to $10 when they were 2025 just a month ago, so that reprint announcement really helped everything pretty much except the level 0 Toka. This is a $100 deck at this point. If you cut the Tokas and you don't want to run the Kurimis at the top end, it becomes a true sub $50 budget option. Definitely worth picking up if you want to play something that's just fun, not super competitive, but does some interesting things, has some interesting interactions, and can compete at locals. And that's all I got. Thank you for joining me for this one. We will be testing this deck on Thursday, Clock Talk next Tuesday, and then we got 5 cards, 5 minutes for Bow Free the following Thursday. In the meantime, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, have a good one.